Morgan Miles, and I'm so thrilled to have you join us for our very first episode. I'm especially excited because as Miss Earth Belize 2024, I've had the incredible opportunity to see Belize's natural beauty up close and personal. And trust me, it's something worth protecting and celebrating. This podcast is all about diving into the heart of Belize, sharing stories, conversations, and ideas that make our home such an unforgettable destination. And we're kicking things off with one of my absolute favorite topics, marine conservation. Belize has been named the world's leading sustainable destination, which is huge. But it's a title that comes with great responsibility. We're here to make sure that everyone, whether you're a local or a visitor, understands why protecting our oceans, reefs, and marine life is so important. Today, I'm joined by someone who really gets the ocean, someone who has been working day in and day out to keep our blue spaces thriving. She's a true champion for Belize's waters, and we're lucky to have her on the show today. Please welcome Jacinta Usher from Oceana Belize.
Thank you so much, Morgan. I'm really excited to be here today and to get into this conversation.
Yes.
But I want to start off by saying congratulations to you for representing us so well in the Philippines.
Thank you. I left my heart on the stage, and I definitely brought my personality and what it means to be a true Belizean to the world and to the stage and everyone. So
you represented us really well.
Thank you.
Congrats, and we're glad to have you back home.
Thank you. So Jacinta, let's dive in. Let's get into it. So I think it's very easy for people to see the beauty of the ocean and not really realize how much it does for us both culturally and economically. Could you just share a bit about why marine biodiversity is so crucial for Belize and how it supports industries like tourism and fishing, for example?
For sure. So we know that our marine environment is a huge part of our cultural identity as Belizeans. For me, I know whenever I was studying abroad and someone asked me, where are you from? And I say Belize, one of the next things out of my mouth is, we have the second longest barrier reef in the world.
And the first in the Western Hemisphere.
Exactly. So it's always a point of pride and identity for us. But more than that, it's really the backbone of our economy, right?
Yes.
So we have, through the tourism industry, through fishing, so many Belizean livelihoods that depend on the health of these marine ecosystems.
Yes.
And we know that tourists come from all over the world to Belize and are attracted by our marine environment, our reef, our snorkeling, our diving, the Great Blue Hole. And so maintaining the integrity of these resources is crucial really for tourism and for Belizean livelihoods that depend on that health. The health of these resources really sustain many families throughout the country. In 2019, we found that tourism and the seafood production sectors contributed 30% of our GDP. So preserving these resources, it's not just an environmental cause, but it really is a vital investment in Belize's resilience and economic stability.
I like to say that it's our heritage.
Exactly.
The theme for Miss Earth Belize, or not Miss Earth Belize, but Miss Earth in general this year in 2024 was heritage. And so when I was asked on the international stage, what's your heritage? I said that, well, my heritage is rich because it's our Belize blue oceans. It's our green jungle forests that we have. Belize is just so diverse. And so having this is just amazing to talk about all of it.
Agreed.
So with our reefs and marine life supporting tourism and fishing, obviously, it's clear that protecting these ecosystems isn't just about environmentalism. It's about our economy, it's about our identity and our way of life. How do you see marine conservation as a key part of Belize's sustainable tourism strategy?
So sustainable tourism and our marine environment, they're inseparably linked, right? Because like I said, we have tourists that come here specifically for those attractions. And then you have eco-tourists that have that eco-conscious mind. They're willing to pay more to go to destinations that are prioritizing the environment and taking steps to really protect the environment, which Belize has done. So it's definitely a beneficial cycle where we see us investing investing in legislation and policies that preserve our environment will continue to attract these types of tourists. And then from that revenue, we can then invest back into conserving and back into practices, local community-based practices that will continue to preserve the health of these ecosystems. So it's definitely a beneficial cycle.
Right. And so when we talk about conservation, we can't just ignore that there's communities that live near the coast, obviously. How are these communities affected when marine ecosystems are damaged? And what kind of adjustments or adaptations have they made or have they had to make to include all of this?
So that's a good question. I think when we talk about, damaging marine ecosystems, the first thing that comes to my mind is fishing and fishers, because they're really on the front line of, they see what's happening out there first before any NGOs. This is their day-to-day, and they're often the stakeholders that are impacted first by any decline in these marine ecosystems. So we've been hearing for years anecdotally that fishers have been, seeing less fish, having to go further out, having to fish for longer to get the same capture that they once did years ago. And so it's really important, things like alternative gear, selective gear, responsible fishing, under Fish Right, Eat Right, we promote responsible fishing and really being able to see how we can minimize the fishing pressure on stocks that are overfished. So definitely alternative livelihoods as well is something that, Oceana and the Belize Coalition for Sustainable Fisheries was trying to push with the gillnet phase out that happened in 2020, where, we had fishers using this destructive gear and they were willing to transition to alternative livelihoods. But those ideas came from them. It wasn't us telling them, okay, go do this now, right? And so many of them actually chose to invest in ecotourism. And so you see that connection where it's still depending on the marine environment and the health of it, but it's in a more sustainable way. So that's really important.
And I mean, still a big kudos to Oceana for actually pushing the whole gillnet and everything and getting that banned. I've grown up in the fishing industry. I've seen it, and with the ban of gillnets, you can see the fish population. It's thriving. It's doing a lot better. I mean, not only the fish, but other sea or river animals, you see more of it. So it's great. I mean, that was definitely one of the things that I tried to push was, Belize has been taking steps and we're growing, we're developing, but it's important that we do it the right way, the sustainable way.
Yeah, it's really the fishers that, have been asking for that for years, since the 90s, really. And so we're glad that we're finally at that point where we have the legislation. Now it's a matter of, making sure it's meaningful.
Right. So let's talk about some of the challenges, starting with the big one, climate change. We've seen how the warming oceans and the coral bleaching events have affected our reefs, for example. What kind of impact has climate change had on Belize's coral reefs? And are there any adaptive measures we're putting into place to kind of help protect these ecosystems?
Girl, it's scary. It's really scary to think of what's happening out there with our waters becoming, every year it's a record-breaking year in terms of how much warmer the waters are getting. Last year in 2023, we saw 2 bleaching events in Belize. And I know this year, coming out of Fragments of Hope reports, we're seeing just last month, bleaching events occurring again this year. So it is really, it's very scary, but for those who don't know, by the way, coral bleaching happens when the waters get really warm, really hot, and the corals get stressed and basically expel the algae that live on them. It's a symbiotic relationship, and that leaves the corals exposed, for a long period of time. They can catch diseases and unfortunately eventually can die. But there is hope through organizations like Fragments of Hope. They've been doing coral restoration projects projects
Yes.
down south. They're based in Placencia, and for over a decade, they've been doing restoration projects in Laughing Bird Key, where they, transplant or outplant corals to the affected areas. And, they have seen an increase in coral cover over the year through
Right.
those efforts. So there is hope, and it's really trying to draw attention to those small glimmers of hope where, it feels very overwhelming at times, climate change. It's such a huge issue, but really supporting, communities and organizations, NGOs that are doing what they can to make a difference. So I think that's really important to highlight, the work that's being done in Belize. And they've gotten, international attention for their coral restoration work. So we can definitely serve as a model to other places.
Yes, and that's definitely something that I want to look into, get more involved in, maybe volunteer down there. I am Miss Earth Belize this year.
For
and
sure.
It's definitely something that is just natural to me. Second nature, just kind of giving my time in the environment, doing all of that. Climate change was definitely something that was discussed heavily at the pageant, and I kind of brought it to the attention, especially for the fishing industry in Belize. Flats fishing, for example, we have been seeing not a decline, but, or you can call it a decline, of our tarpon numbers. The water is just too hot, and all of the tarpon are going deeper. For the colder water, and all of these tourists that are coming in, they're not catching the fish that they want. And it's something that we as a country, we need to figure out how we can kind of fight climate change. So small steps that we can take it's
a big issue, but together with taking those small steps, we can definitely make a difference.
For sure. So another issue that we face is illegal fishing. It can devastate our marine protected areas. So Jacinta, what steps are being taken to tackle illegal fishing in Belize? And are there any further actions that could maybe strengthen or reinforce it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Very relevant. I think the first thing that comes to my mind is Fish Right, Eat Right, which I'm very passionate about. So just to share a little bit about that program, it's a collaborative effort with Oceana, other NGOs like WCS, the BTB, the Belize Fisheries Department, BTIA, where back in 2016, this project was launched, or this program was launched, I should say. And the idea was really to do just that, to see how we could curb illegal fishing, but through the consumers, right? Because if there is a buyer, there will be a seller. So it's really important that as consumers, we're aware of the laws and the regulations so that we can demand better from fishers. So a lot of sensitization work went into Fish Right, Eat Right over the years, doing ads and working with restaurateurs in particular and chefs that have seen, illegal product on the market, out of season product, undersized product, sadly even protected species trying to, being sold, fish fraud. There was that incident, I don't know if you recall, a couple years ago where a restaurant in San Pedro, Chef Jenny Staines, who's one of our champions of Fish Right, Eat Right, she actually was able to identify fish fraud because she's, such an experienced chef. She was able to look at the fillet, and what the fisher had done is use crazy glue to stick a different skin patch on the fish to try to pass it off as, a fish that wasn't protected. So these things happen, but it's really important for us to educate the consumers so that we know what questions to ask when we go to buy fish at the market. We know
you're prepared.
Yeah, that your fillet is supposed to have a skin patch on it so that you can identify what type of fish it is. And if it doesn't, you have to ask her, you don't buy from that person anymore. So these things have been ongoing, and I think it's definitely a part of the solution. We have, with the gillnet ban, we've been able to partner closely with the Coast Guard, who is really great, very responsive in terms of, actioning illegal nets. When we get reports at Oceana, we pass that on to them. And, they recently got 4 drones, I believe. So I think with technology, we can also really increase the enforcement effort. It is a very resource heavy task, right? Our seas are huge. It's impossible to be everywhere all at once, but definitely if we're all involved in the effort and we invest in the right technology, it's definitely, we can make progress there.
Yeah, and I must commend the Coast Guard as well. I was actually out there at Lighthouse with them, or not Lighthouse, sorry, Turn F with them. And we visited one of the seaweed farms out there.
Oh, nice.
And just their whole everything there, how they responded to situations and how they handle different things out there. They are passionate about what they do. They are definitely the right people for the environment for Belize. And they were telling me a bit about the drones that they have out there and the advancements that they're making and what they have planned for down the road. And I think Belize is in good hands when it comes to conservation out there.
Exciting time. Shout out to Admiral Bennett and the Belize Coast Guard for always being on top of it.
So Belize's Barrier Reef was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site, which is incredible, obviously. Has that destination helped with the conservation efforts in any tangible way that you know of?
Yeah, I think being designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site is very beneficial for our country. The brand that brings, I think it shines a light on our marine resources as being, significant and, one of the most biodiverse in the world, right? That's a huge brand. And so I definitely think there's benefits there. Some tourists, when they're Googling where they want to go, what destinations, they actually look at those lists and say, I want to check off these UNESCO World Heritage Sites off of my list. So it definitely brings more light and eyes on Belize. And I think for Belizeans in general, when we were reinstated on the list, because recall back in 2008, we actually were put on the list of endangered sites. And so for 10 years, we were off the list because of things like development and, entertaining offshore oil, etc. So taking certain steps and certain legislation like the moratorium on offshore oil, those steps helped us to get back on the UNESCO designation, which was great in 2018. And I remember that being really celebrated countrywide. And I think it really gave Belizeans a renewed sense of pride for our marine resources. So there's definitely benefit there.
And I love that. I love that we are again, a bucket list destination in Belize. I'm here for it.
Totally.
So I love that we're seeing more and more young people getting involved in conservation. For me, that was definitely something that I was pushing. Like, how can I use my platform to bring or educate the youth about, conservation, sustainability, things like that. It's very inspiring. How are the Belizean youth being engaged in the marine conservation efforts, and what kinds of educational programs are helping them become advocates for the environment in Belize?
Girl, I'm with you. I think for me personally, Oceana has an annual general meeting every year where we bring our wave makers from across the country together to network. And these are young people, high school to junior college age. Our wave makers are all ages, but for the AGM, that's our target audience.
Which was amazing.
You were there this year. Yes.
That blew my mind.
The energy that these youth bring, it's always so just re-energizing for me to see them really so passionate, not just about our marine resources, but, really seeing that light bulb go off when they have the information and they're willing to speak up and to ask questions, and to get involved. I think that's so important in building advocacy and stewardship for our marine resources. So at Oceana, we definitely we work with youth a lot through our field representative program in the schools across the country and through our Wave Maker program. That's how we refer to our volunteers. But in terms of wider initiatives, Reef Week is a huge one, and that's a collaborative effort, again, with organizations and agencies like the BTB, who's involved every year with our Reef Week. That happens in March. And we do it in March around the Mesoamerican Reef Day, which is March 10th. But that's a week of activities that gets put on by organizations across the country, where we do debates, poster competitions, cleanup campaigns, really targeting youth. And then at the end, it culminates in a fair where we invite the schools to come out and to interact with these organizations. So Reef Week is definitely trying to instill that stewardship in our youth across the country. We choose a different coastal community every year to have the fair in, and I think since I've been a part of this conservation community, we've done almost all coastal communities and inland towns. So we might have to start from square one and go back to the drawing board for Reef Week 2025. But always exciting to work with youth for sure.
Good. Well, you heard it, guys. Make sure you're writing that date down for Reef Week 2025. I know I will be there, so mark it in your calendar.
Definitely.
Come see us. Come talk to us.
Yes.
And it's not just Belizeans, right? It's our visitors. They can play a role too. For anyone coming to Belize, what should they know to make sure that they're supporting conservation during their stay with us here in Belize?
Yeah, totally. I think our tourists that come here, a lot of them are already eco-conscious and eco-minded. You see them walking with their water bottles.
Or their eco bags.
Their tote bags. Right. So I think that's great. Definitely minimizing plastic is a easy step.
Kick plastic.
Kick plastic. Don't take plastic wherever you go. From what I've seen, I think the tourists that come here do a great job at that.
Yes.
But outside of that, I think, again, when it comes to seafood and, wanting to know where your fish was caught, just asking basic questions. We often see coastal communities, restaurants saying catch of the day, right?
Right.
So we want to know that fish was caught responsibly. It's a fresh catch. You're not sitting down to eat imported catfish, for example. You're sitting down to eat a fish that was caught, in our marine resources. Exactly. So I think tourists can definitely play their part as consumers to ask those questions like we spoke about earlier. This reminds me of a project that we piloted under Fish Right Eat Right that tells that story. So it has the e-monitoring and reporting aspect of it allowed people sitting at a restaurant to scan a QR code and actually see their fish in their plate being caught by a Belizean fisher and read up about the story. So having that transparency and traceability aspect, it's very cool. We definitely, want to see that expand.
Yes.
It was a pilot project, so we definitely are looking for opportunities to expand that. But outside of that too, I think tourists can definitely listen to their tour guides. Our tour guides are very informed about what to do and what not to do when you're snorkeling. Right. Don't touch the marine life. Don't stand on the coral. These simple little steps that they can take.
Don't pick up the starfish. Come on, guys.
Exactly. Don't do it for the picture. Like, don't do it for the gram, But also, Oceana has put together a green vendor registry on our website where we highlight vendors and businesses from across the country that are taking steps to promote eco-friendly alternatives.
Yes.
So this started before the single-use plastics ban came into effect. So businesses that were doing this long before it was law. And so we have that list on our website where they can go and see in different parts of the country if they want to support small businesses and, resorts that are really taking steps to the right direction.
And that's the best way helping climate change shop local.
Exactly. Yeah. Totally.
Jacinta, thank you so much for sharing all of this information with us, for coming in today. We have made such a big impact, I believe, on our viewers, and just you coming in and adding in everything has just been the cherry on top.
No, thank you so much, Morgan. It's been a pleasure to chat with you, and I think that the main takeaway is when we come together, when we're informed, when we have the information, we can really make a difference. So thanks for having this conversation with me.
Yes, and please remember, for everyone that is watching, conservation just isn't about what we see, and it's not about just for the scientists, it's not just for them, it's what we can do.
Exactly.
How we can leave our impact, what we can do, the little steps that we can take for conservation and sustainability in Belize. And that's a wrap on our first episode. Thank you all for joining us on Tea, Talk, and Tourism. Next, we'll be talking about Belize's incredible wildlife and the conservation work happening on land. So grab your tea, your talk, and let's keep the conversation going. See you soon!
Cheers!